Travar platform was a good example of how self-organized media and the independent cultural scene deeply influence the new generation of political processes and movements in Kosovo. Also, independent cultural scene of Serbia was invited, but today one of the centers of independent culture, magazine, it's a long story, but it was supposed to be an experimental model of how independent organizations can be organized around one center given by the city in 2006-07. Today and tomorrow, independent cultural scene organizes a string of events on the occasion of this 10th anniversary and before the probable shutting down this center, which is not a surprise considering how the city government of Belgrade announced and acted upon those decisions in past few years. Also, in our introduction, because this will be a competition who has more bizarre problems among Zagreb and Belgrade in independent culture, I would just remind of this decision of the Ministry of Culture of Serbia to break the agreement with Independent Culture of Serbia of mutual understanding and cooperation, which was not much, but it was some kind of documented intention of the ministry to, in a way, involve independent culture in decision-making processes at some levels, at least. By breaking this contract a few years ago, a new phase started. Okay, everything's okay. So a few years ago, a new era started in Serbia with very vulgar, open, straightforward, hostile politics towards contemporary production in culture and independent culture, of course. Well, our center being one of the centers of that dynamics, not only production, but also public forum for independent culture and different sorts of support, encouragement, and debates and dynamics and international context of independent culture. We are deeply, let's say, struck and involved in the struggles that are going on now. But one of the most often sentences we could hear in debates about independent culture is how positive example from Croatia could have helped us, because in Croatia independent culture was much more, let's say, evolved in its mechanisms of cooperation and participation in public governance, and also they had more obvious results to show how independent culture shaped some of the public policies and some, to a certain extent, public discourse in Zagreb. Therefore, Mirela Travar will now compete with me in comparing those really bizarre, vulgarly open right-wing policies we have to struggle now from Belgrade and Zagreb, with one advantage to Belgrade: we never had any, let's say, similar comforting situation in cooperation with public governance as such, except for this gesture of this agreement with independent culture, which was erased very rapidly after. So, Mirela, what is bizarre now going on in Zagreb, and what is still the positive example we can look up to?
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Mirela. I'm currently the president of Alliance Operation City, which is a Zagreb platform for independent culture and youth. But of course, that is not my only job. I'm also a trainer, facilitator. I have been active in the civil society for the past 10 years, and I have been active in social movements and initiated some movements, and I have been following and actively I've been actively participating in changes that have been going on in the last 10 or so years in Croatia. So I would actually like to start with, I would actually like to finish with the bizarre, because chronologically we are sort of in the most bizarre period right now. But
And
we'll get to
dangerous.
it. We'll get to it. But I sort of wanted to give an overview of what has been going on, and in a sense of how independent culture, especially independent culture in Zagreb, which is a city where I come from, has served as a source of tying together and coming together of different actors, and how in the last 10 years, with the things that we've been doing, with our initiatives, with our advocacy, with our campaigns, with our activism, we sort of accumulated the social capital in Zagreb that led to really transformative changes, I would say, in, especially in the last 2 weeks, but we'll also get to that. So independent culture in Zagreb has always been sort of a generator for change, and the most how I say, the most evident practices in these changes are started somewhere around 2004 when we actively started campaigning, and I would like to say here there were like 2 clusters of activities that were very public and that had results. This was around 2004. We started advocating for cultural infrastructure, because there was none cultural infrastructure. There was no space where youth and independent culture could act out and could work and could do their programs. So we started an advocacy campaign for a center that would serve independent culture and youth, and this advocacy campaign lasted for 6 years. We were very adamant, and it's something that usually people say in Zagreb, you don't want, you know, those actors from independent culture scene to get on your back, because you will not get them off your back. So this is something that we were doing, and this was a long struggle for us to sort of open the public discussion about what independent culture is, how it connects to other sectors, and as a result, after 6 years of advocacy, public campaigning, protests, we today have an institution that's called Pogon, and this is an institution. It's a center for Zagreb Center for Independent Culture and Youth, and it's an institutional innovation in Zagreb and in Croatia, because it's a first formal public-civil partnership that we have in this region. We have today lots of, on this trace, lots of public-civil partnerships, but they're not legalized, they're not formal, which means that our Center for Independent Culture and Youth is being co-governed by the alliance where I work, so NGOs on one hand and the city on the other hand, and it was established as a public institution in culture. And this process that lasted for a very long time, and it really wasn't easy in the interim, where we couldn't communicate with local authorities, we couldn't get answers from them, so it was a couple of years of struggles. We even squatted some buildings. We wanted to get it out there in public space that we have this need for a space for independent culture and youth. And in the end, today we have an office space and a conference room and the big hall, which is called Jedinstvo Unity, that is for concerts, museum, for exhibitions, and so on. So this is one of the processes that I wanted to sort of just put on the table that we can discuss later, because it's very much interconnected contextually with what's going on with Magazine here in Belgrade, what's going on in Skopje. There are also efforts there, and it's sort of capillary spread out to other cities and countries in the neighborhood that saw, okay, so there actually can be a formal legal partnership between a local government and independent culture organizations, which was total science fiction when we started our advocacy campaign. So this is one cluster This is one success story that I wanted to say, but the other story which had more momentum, which was also a source, it also came from independent culture, was this mass movement that is called Right to the City, which is sort of very similar to what's going on with Ne davimo Beograd that you heard before. So we fought for 7 years. So the campaign lasted for 7 years. We thought we were going to die, everyone. The campaign lasted for 7 years. The case was very similar. There were private clientelistic interests in the city of Zagreb to devastate the part of the old town to build a shopping center. And as we've heard, the urban plan of Zagreb was changed several times so that it would fit the investors, and there was big money involved. And our campaign was basically, our campaign started as a place of resistance and saying enough to this type of clientelistic, corruptive ways of governing the city. But as it gained momentum during the 7 years, we've had thousands and thousands of people in the street. We've had people guarding the street that we wanted to save. It's a famous Varšavska street case. We had people for months sleeping on the streets. We had shifts, who is going to sleep when. So it was a big campaign and a big advocacy effort. The thing is that it sort of went from us trying to preserve the core of our city, and it became a symbolic place of resistance where thousands and thousands of people started supporting us and just started saying no to the overall corruptive politics that were in place then, not just in Zagreb, but in entire Croatia. And the culmination, I would say, of this campaign was when over 100 activists, we got arrested because we were guarding the streets, and it was a peaceful protest. We did a sit-in, and over 120 activists were arrested because of private interests. So the police arrested activists because they wanted to make sure the investors could start building the shopping center. But this is, and this was sort of a beginning of this capillary spreading out of this movement of local communities saying no to private interests in their cities. After our campaign, which was one of the results, is that now we have a very well-established NGO called Right to the City that is still dealing with city issues, still preventing corruptive practices, and there have been movements in that sense. For example, today, everyone is going to think twice before they go and change the urban plan of a city. And in the aftermath of our campaign is that a similar process started going on in Dubrovnik also, when also private interests wanted to build hotels and golf resorts on a very beautiful part, yes, Srđ, on a very beautiful part of the city, which is very public and which should remain public. And although we didn't stop, we weren't, you know, we didn't stop the shopping center. You can see it today in Zagreb. Srđ did manage to stop. So Dubrovnik did manage to stop this project that was against everything that was common sense. So my point is that the movements that were sort of, we started them, you know, independent actors, people who were dealing with culture and art and who were sort of always the ones that were critically thinking and critically engaging and wanted to always step out of their context, so to say, and to see the broader picture, were the ones that started this ripple effect of other movements that spread out to other cities. For example, 10 years ago, when we couldn't even imagine that we would have a public a public-civil partnership because it was just public-private till then, and nobody could know what the conditions were and how a private firm agreed with the city something. Now we have almost 18 initiatives all over Croatia that want to have a social culture center and that want to have public-private partnerships with their local communities, with their local government. But I think one of the most important things, this is the last thing I'm going to say before I come around to 2016, because that's a whole different story and a whole other level of bizarre. The social capital that we accumulated, I would say the pinnacle was in 2015 when we stepped out of, okay, so first there was independent culture, and then we decided, okay, let's form new partnerships, let's go outside of our field of work, and then we sort of naturally started working with the youth sector. After a couple of years we had a solid partnership with the youth sector, then we said, okay, how about starting to work with other partners, because we can't just deal with one issue and pretend that it's not interconnected with other issues. We cannot fight for this urban to preserve the urban part of the city without realizing that it will impact jobs of people, that it will impact traffic, that we have to work with green activists. So we started to make connections with other actors, and in 2015 we formed a partnership with unions, and this was the first really visible, really structural partnership that we had, like NGOs coming from independent culture youth, human rights organizations that started connecting with workers' rights. And in 2015, together with the unions and other NGOs, we started a big campaign that was called "We Won't Give Our Highways," because the government wanted to privatize the highways, which would have a huge, Croatia is a touristic country, that would have a huge impact on the safety of roads, on the pockets of citizens, and the loan that our government wanted to take, and sort of the paying off, the debt would be paid off by us and our children and generations to come. And we were successful in that because we sort of saw, okay, so the power of NGOs plus unions plus workers' rights organizations is something that even the government is not prepared to get into conflict with. And based on this social capital, 3 months ago we ran in elections in Zagreb, and we won 4 seats 4 days ago. Yeah, so now for us, this is the ultimate transformative power that we think sort of showed, because we were campaigning for 3 months, politically campaigning. But our social capital was there years before, and people recognized this. They said, aha, I know you. You were the ones who were guarding our streets. You were the ones who said, no, we won't sell our highways. You were the ones who said no to this bullshit referendum law. So this social capital led us to think, okay, maybe this is the time to be truly transformative and to see that the political solutions are no more. There are no political solutions that you can say yes to. We are the political solution that we want to say yes to. And we ran in elections, and in just 3 months campaigning, we won 4 seats in city parliament. So I think this is so far our biggest success. Going back to 2016 and the level of bizarre, I would like to stress out that there were 2 campaigns going on in 2016. So there was a change in government. 2016, we have a very unstable political situation. And the far right in 2016 gained the central positions in the government. So the Ministry of Culture, the Minister of Culture was a far right activist. We called him activist because he was really working to suppress the media. He was really working to shut down NGOs. He was really working to demolish and destabilize the system that we have been building for the last 15 years. And parallel to that, also some key positions in the government and the government offices went to the far right. And this was a struggle that took on two main courses in 2016. One was the struggle against the culture, the Minister of Culture, and the other one was to preserve civil society as it was. So the attacks were coming from two sides. The attack was coming in the field of culture because someone out there realized that the culture is a really important symbolic place for the people and that it can be very well used to brainwash, to educate whatever they want to educate, to promote national values. So they realized, okay, so culture is that place. We should have our minister there. So that was one fight that we were doing. And the initiative that we formed was called Kulturnjaci 2016. I would translate it as culturists. So there were people who were coming from the cultural sector, both independent, both institutional. We had people working in the Museum of Modern Arts. We had people that worked in the National Theater. All those people came together and sort of decided that, okay, this is, how can I say, artists and people who are embedded in their art, most of the time, in my experiences, don't go into activist waters because they're so preoccupied with their art and with what they're producing that it's tough to get them, to say, okay, you should go out to the streets now with us. But the situation was that the new government and their tendencies touched in depth their core values that even they said, no. This is enough. So we had really prominent names like opera divas standing with our side. And this was a campaign that was very much public, and it was based on the core values, human rights, anti-fascism. It was sort of out of necessity to remind ourselves that, hey, yes, we are that society. We should reaffirm these values because obviously someone is making us. I mean, this isn't a subject that we want to deal with because, yeah, this is great, we want to talk about it. No, because they're making us talk about it, we have to deal with it now. So this was one initiative, and we did street performances, we did interviews, we did roundtables, we did protests, we did actions. It was all kind of, and it was very much focused what we wanted to. Most of our actions and most of the things we were doing were coming from literature, were coming from art, because we wanted to reaffirm that yes, art is important, culture is important, and you can't use this place of freedom to do the opposite. We won't allow you to do this. So this was one current. The other one was the attack on NGOs that was happening. There's this institution in Croatia called National Foundation for Civil Society Development. It is the single most important institution for NGOs in Croatia because it gives them institutional support and structural support. And most of the organizations in Croatia are being funded by this institution. In 2016, they cut the funds of that institution by more than 70%, which means that most of the NGOs in Croatia became jobless, programless, everything that you can imagine. So the other current of our fight in 2016 was the Initiative for Strong Civil Society. That was also, I would say, successful because we managed to negotiate that the cut that was made for the National Foundation was in the end a bit less than they planned to. But it was a hard struggle. It was also very public, but the hardest thing was to communicate with the public why NGOs are important and why NGOs are not communists, are not someone who is just draining public funds. What do NGOs actually do? Yeah, we do a lot of useful stuff. Look around in your local community. So it was these two currents of initiatives were sort of the source of it was us people who were coming from independent culture. So do you think I should stop here? Maybe just to refer, we did have the government that did what I'm talking about did collapse at the end of 2016. we had new elections, and I wouldn't say that much changed, except that, and which really scares me, and now I have to say that they changed their tactics. They are no longer doing it publicly. They're doing it institutionally. So our struggle today is to ask ourselves, what kind of methods do we need to use if something isn't public anymore? Because when you're an NGO, you don't have the power that they have. Your power is the public. Your power is to get out on the street, gather people, and let your message be heard. This is your basic tool for advocacy, yeah? And so they changed up on us, which is like, why are you a step ahead of that? That's not cool. And we are now in a position that we have to think of a new tactical approach to deal with this slow creeping institutional changes that they're doing, because they're not saying, yes, we are going to change the constitution today, because they know they won't be able to do that. They're saying, we're going to change a regulation here, and we're going to put a far right person that nobody knows about in this board, and we're going to change the board in this institution, and so slowly, creepingly, they're changing things on us. And how do you tactically, I mean, you can't go out on the street, have a press conference and say they changed the person in this board of an institution that nobody knows about. And this is exactly what they're doing. So for me, the big question is, what are the new tactics and the new approaches that we have to learn to fight these new efforts? Because 2016, if anything, showed that NGOs in democracies have sort of lost their edge. This is what 2016 showed. It showed that they need to be reminded of how to actively fight and actively keep on fighting, that it's not just one protest, that it's not just one round table, that it's not just a declaration, that it's a continuous fight with ever-changing strategies and tactics. And that if you want the public on your side, you need to communicate with them continuously, because otherwise you're losing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's inspiring to hear how NGOs see 2016 as a revealing year of incapacitating NGOs. Aldo Milohnić wrote about this professionalization of what we used to know, civil society and alternative culture from the 80s that happened in the 90s and 2000s. And this professionalization of what was the field of this enthusiasm and activism logically led to such alienation. And I remember that 2 years ago actually, a colleague from Zagreb coming here to one of our working meetings, desperate because of this ultra-right Minister of Culture's plans with them, said, we need to learn from you again how to work without state in the system of our work. Because the thing is, the only advantage of our, let's say, vitality of the independent culture and part of the civil society is that we actually never had an opportunity to rely much. The funniest illustration probably and most bizarre would be, and we could compete there now, yearly call for proposals for projects in contemporary production, artistic and cultural production for each field by Ministry of Culture, and we also apply, for example, to the city of Belgrade call. And independent cultural scene of Serbia did an analysis of last 3 years, how the public budget intended, designated to this contemporary production was distributed, and we can start the competition now. One of the most supported areas of production in contemporary art production was old crafts. You go.
It's a different system because we have cultural committees.
Okay.
And what is bizarre in Croatia is now that in cultural committees, for example, we have it divided. There's innovative culture, there's music culture, there's movie culture, and in innovative cultural practices, that's what it's called, where it's basically these funds are meant to be, to have projects for independent cultural organizations. People sitting in the committee that are deciding on it are mostly institutional painters or somebody who works in, I don't know, an old museum, So these are the ones that are deciding on whether or not...
Your practice is innovative.
Yeah, my practice is innovative, exactly, yeah.
Well, this bizarre competition can also indicate one important thing, that in 2010 in Belgrade, when the dream was to get the nomination for Cultural Capital of Europe, somebody said, okay, 30% of that capital of Europe has to go to independent culture, civil society. And all of a sudden, you could see how a completely new and weird and bizarre list of organizations appeared of this independent culture. And 2013, for example, in Vojvodina also indicated how it's easy to forge civil society, culture, or anywhere else. You just form phantom or some fake organizations and redirect the budget. So when it comes to that, I would again go back to Aldo Miluhnić and how we now define, well, there is a continuity actually. Independent culture, as we define it today, is in continuity with what we now call historically alternative culture of Yugoslavia. Yeah. They had the infrastructure of youth cultural centers, student cultural centers. It was actually a part of public infrastructure for youth, and that's where all this freedom and alternative was developed. With this NGOization of this field, we came to this point that for a while it was the expected field, probably even not recognizable or ghettoized in a way in this elite language of alternative and independent culture, that wasn't affecting much in the beginning of 2000s major processes here. But now, again, after the whole circle of this discussion of culturalization, inspired by Boris Budin, he was here 2 days ago and really inspired us all every time he was here. Well, his thesis on culturalization was for a long discussed, and why is it culture that is left to be so free for activism and so on, of course, and how political issues are buried in a way in this cultural performance. But today we witness with our center and analysis of our daily work and monthly and yearly work that that's the remaining field that is in a way public. We are deprived of a majority of public spaces that we could rely on, even in those 90s that I really now feel privileged to be young in, concerning the alternative culture. We also, I think the culture is the only, here in Belgrade, again, I see in Serbia, a remaining channel to the public, so the responsibility rises now for any kind of mobilization, and a recent example was exactly the protest. The protest this spring, I think were in a way spontaneous and organized without any usual iconography or instruments, but lasted and endured several phases of those tabloid attacks, also due to support of this network, Nedavim Belgrade and Independent Culture, and their activism in media, also prominent, let's say, official culture. So, one of good examples you didn't mention and I wanted to, so I get to, is Dubrovnik. Anja Žuvala recently informed me that there is a good chance that this city will have a, let's say, exemplary cultural center based on participatory management. How did they do that? I don't know. Somehow it was accepted in the city council, city assembly. So if we talk about democracy and culture, maybe culture being so, let's say, flexible can also develop some experimental forms of democratic government of culture.
We absolutely, absolutely. We did that. I mean, in 2002, we formed a network that's called Culture Network. And why did we do it? Because we realized that the funds that were being given out to non-profit organizations that were dealing with independent culture, and that the donors that were giving didn't understand what we're trying to do. And so, we said to ourselves, we don't want to become donor-driven. So we don't want to become the organization who, in lack of funds, is going to do what the funder asks. So we established the Culture Network, which is based on the principles of participatory and direct decision-making processes on who and which organization is going to get a grant. So it works like this. Culture as a platform fundraises from different actors, and then this fund goes to other organizations that are deciding. Everyone who applies for a project within our platform, within the Culture platform, has to decide on everyone else who is going to get a certain amount of funds to implement their project. And this is the first participatory, direct democracy fund-making that was implemented. So yes, and this was another institutional innovation that we started. And what was the ripple effect? Last year, so 2016, it was the last quarter of 2015. This model that was implemented in Croatia for the past 15 years went regional. So we established Cooperativa Network, which was established in 2012 as a formal network of organizations. It was formed by 21 organizations from countries all over the ex-Yugoslavia region area. And in 2016, we had the first pilot program that basically sort of leaned onto the model that the Culture Network had in Croatia, and we developed as a cooperative. So Cooperativa Network developed its own model, and we had the first pilot program of exchange between countries, between 21 organizations that were coming from 7 different countries, and it was amazing. We've had 12 programs. We've had so many artists coming through this program. We've had so much content. We've had so many exhibitions, just performances, arts. It was just a year of sort of realizing what could happen if organizations in the region had an actual chance and had a systematic support to do something. And I think for some, this is really scary, because if a circle of organizations from one city can make a mass movement that spreads out across the country, imagine what could be done if organizations from 7 different countries in the same area started doing the same thing. And that's why I think it was cut off, because this year we have no funds for that. Absolutely not, 0. No.
Okay, well, when I think about the reverse process of culturalization, that's repoliticization of culture, I mostly think about those examples of reorganizing your thinking of the production, rethinking the production, resources, and collective decision-making. Yeah. So, in a way, congratulations. I remember that you said you have to leave us in 10 minutes because we will borrow Mirela to Magazine to celebrate 10 years of Independent Culture Scene Center. So now we have 10 minutes of questions if you have some.
Or just comments or anything that you're...
Or some maybe corrections, maybe
Maybe
Somebody
else
remembers
wants to compete.
better. Yeah. So
Maybe
many years.
comment.
I
Congratulations
feel-
for Zagreb Jenaš.
Okay.
I was really happy when I was following your campaign on Facebook, and remind me of what we done for defending of City Trade Center, but this was much more bigger and serious. I don't know, maybe two questions: how you funded the campaign, and what was the biggest problem that you have in the process, because you went in the political field and it's much more different from these NGO projects and grassroots initiatives. So just
We funded the campaign, we had citizens' donations, which means that we called our family and friends and begged them to give us money. This was, this is so, yeah. So basically our platform, Zagreb, Jenaš, Zagreb is ours. This is the platform that won 4 seats in city parliament. There's in the strictest, the strictest form, it is a political party, but the political party is an instrument so that we could participate in elections, because the platform, people that are in the platform can and are deciding and are in the decision-making processes, regardless of not if they're in the party. So, at first we were funded by ourselves, so everyone gave as much money as they could, and once we started gaining momentum on Facebook, then citizens started to give us some donations, but mostly it was voluntary work, lots and lots of voluntary work. We had several teams that were doing the campaign. So we had the team that was writing the programs. We had the team that was answering people on Facebook, and they were posting the Facebook status. We had the operative team that was thinking about, okay, what action are we going to do tomorrow? What's the plan for next week? And it was extremely intense. And it was extremely draining, because it's not like we're not used to campaigning. It's basically, I would even say some people are addicted to it, because between campaigns they're like, I think we should do another campaign. But this was a different sort of campaign, and we were all kind of scared that of this arena that we're going, because we are changing arenas, whether we want it, whether we like it or not. And we did decide that one of the reasons, when we had our initial meeting, when we founded the platform, this new political platform, one of the reasons that we decided, yes, we are going to do this, is because we wanted to reappropriate what politics mean. We wanted to start a new trend in what politics is and what political party is and what it should mean, and sort of go back to the basic thing that it's class values, it's a class fight, and we should reappropriate that. And I think one of the biggest challenges was, are we going to do it alone, or are we going to do it in a coalition with someone? This meeting lasted for 3 days when we were deciding this, because it's a platform of 100 people, and it's 100 people including activists, artists, musicians, designers, anarchists. I remember even one anarchist said, if this is a political party, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm still here. But it was very positive all together. And yes, I don't think the hardest decisions were behind us. I think the hardest decisions are coming now that we are in city parliament. I think the hardest decisions are going to come now when phone calls start, when you start to question on whether you should compromise on this or not compromise on that, or how these 30,000 people that voted for us are going to think about your decision. I think the toughest time is ahead of us, not behind.
Any more questions, comments?
So, following your last sentence, do you have any plans for the next election in Croatia, like Zagreb is naš, is like in that coalition? And how is that functioning, considering for example, you have a Radnička fronta there, with the exact Radnička fronta, workers front there. with the exact left straight indicators there, and also NGOs, Rada Borčanov. How is that functioning, if you can tell us there? And just a comment, because you were competing between Serbia and Croatia, if we were there, like from Bosnia,
no Bosnia, no.
you know, we were the winners. So
I know.
Okay.
You win, I'm sorry. The question is, are we thinking about national elections?
Yes.
Well, the current consensus, because the campaign is over for a week, and then the government almost fell apart, and we were like, please don't fall apart. we can't do this right now. So yes, our vision and idea was we're going to start locally, but we definitely want to go, and we want to see what we can do. But our goal and our idea was not short term. We want to do it long term. We want to do long-term changes in the field of politics, but the thing is, our capacities are still low, and if, you know, elections are going to happen in the fall, we are crazy enough to do it, but I don't know who'll live through it, so, yeah. Oh, in 2 years, I think we're gonna rock it.
Okay, we will, thank you. We will now let Mirela join
another
the
panel.
magazine, another panel. So it's in a way our sharing of resources. See you at 6 to continue with a new panel, new subject with Lola. She will call us.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, see you in 15.
Thank you, guys.